So thank you. So our next speaker, Jared Basler of Basler Studios.
Thank you, everybody. I'm actually not here as Jared Basler from Basler Studios. I'm here as Jared Basler from the ADU Coalition. I'm the chair of the ADU Coalition, also sit on the board for the Casita Coalition, which is a statewide. Casita Coalition is a statewide nonprofit advocacy group that grew out of the Bay Area Council that Bob talked about earlier. We help with the statewide legislation, but also implementing on regional and local levels. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's new in the state law that has changed. We've been talking about ADUs since 2017 when the laws drastically changed. We had another major revision this year. The state laws that were passed that are in effect now started January 1st. There's quite a bit that's still being worked out on the state level, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But the kind of big things that have changed is that local jurisdictions can no longer require owner occupancy, which was a big issue for a lot of homeowners when they were building these, because owner occupancy, requiring the owner to live on site, can limit flexibility on that site moving forward, permanently depresses the property value, and essentially ties that housing unit to the owner living there. Can no longer require minimum lot size to build ADUs. We saw cities in the past require minimum quarter acre to build an ADU when their average lot size was in the 5,000 to 6,000 square foot range. Cities can no longer require more than 4 foot side and rear setbacks for ADUs, which is a big thing. And then talking about garage conversions, cities can no longer require replacement parking for garage conversion. So cities can no longer require replacement parking for garage conversions. Another big change was that kind of went under the radar was that HOAs and planned unit developments can no longer prohibit ADUs. So any CC&Rs in communities that used to limit the development to only one dwelling are null and void. Not the whole CC&Rs, but that portion. So they have to treat ADUs just like a city would. So they have all the same rules in the HOA. The impact fees, we talk about how the county is doing a lot to waive a lot of the fees that are in place. The state has come in and said that under 750 square feet, there's no impact fees that can be charged. So whether you're in county or city or wherever you are, I know that the county currently has a fee waiver program in effect for 5 years, or $11 million, which won't last 5 years. So the state came in and said under 750 square feet, no impact fees. And one thing that's really important there is that includes things like traffic, development impact fees, park fees, and it also includes school fees. So for ADUs, that threshold that has historically been 500 square feet is now 750 square feet on school fees. We'll get to questions at the end. The other big thing that they have brought down the time that a city has to review these projects. They brought them down to 60 days. That doesn't mean that they give you your review back at 59 days and then you don't turn it back in the next day and you are denied. What it means is as soon as they give you your plan check corrections back, that time pauses for you. So it's a way to help provide protection to homeowners going through the process, but also keep cities moving forward and keep these projects moving forward. Ministerial review. So this is a building permit. So cities can't require you to go through a process, a discretionary process, where the answer may be yes or may be no, but you have to go through this long process to find out. These are guaranteed by right. So ministerial process is allowed by right. So you demonstrate that you meet the building code in your plans, and then you are given the building permit. And then the last thing that kind of did was nullify all those ordinances that don't meet the new requirements. So we're seeing a lot of cities now going through the process of adopting new ordinances after they just did, 90 days or 18 months ago. So we're seeing a lot of questions out there as far as what's allowed, and part of that is because the cities have to go through this process all over again of revising their rules since these new laws went into effect. So I'm going to get into what the state allows you to do, and this is where a lot of the confusion has come. How many of you guys have heard the term triplex the state? Good, that's great. There's advocacy groups out there and opponents of ADUs saying that these new laws essentially create a triplex situation on any single family lot. That's not the case. There are very specific situations where you can have an ADU and a JADU, but a JADU is not the same thing as an ADU. A JADU does require owner occupancy, and it's limited to within the existing footprint of the house. The analogy I use is if I say you can have 3 vehicles, you can have 2 cars and a pair of rollerblades. Those aren't the same thing. Yes, they both get you from point A to point B, but not in the same way. So what you can do, I'll get into what this actually looks like on a lot in a couple of slides. So if you have a single family home, you can do a ADU as a conversion of part of your primary. You can do it as a new detached. You can do a JADU. And if you are doing a JADU, you can also do a detached ADU. What matters here is not what your zoning is. It matters about what's on your lot. So when we talk about single family home, single family residence versus multifamily, multifamily is 2 attached dwellings. So a duplex, that's multifamily. 2 single family homes that are not attached to each other on the same lot, those are single family homes. So it matters more about what's on your lot than what your zoning is. On multifamily, there's some this is where we get into some of the stuff that the state is still working out. You can, on a multifamily property, so say you have a duplex where they're attached to each other, you can do 2 new detached ADUs and potentially a conversion of attached accessory spaces. So let's get into a typical scenario where this is a very basic diagrammatic site plan. I've got a single family dwelling and a garage. I can do a conversion of a portion of that primary to an ADU. Doesn't require owner occupancy, follows all the ADU requirements. I could also convert that garage. So I can do a conversion through an ADU through a garage conversion. I could do a JADU as a conversion of the primary. I could do a new detached ADU. What I'm showing you up here is the scenarios that you can get to. And the only way you get to 2 units is with that JADU and a new detached ADU. And again, that JADU requires owner occupancy. It's essentially like renting out a room in your house. That's what it was intended for at the state level. But it comes with a deed restriction, which is problematic. On multifamily, this is that kind of weird scenario where how many of you have multifamily properties out there? Okay. We can talk later, but essentially you can do some new stuff on multifamily properties that you couldn't do before. And that's why from the state level, they're still trying to work out some of these rules because this created some really confusing situations. The old rule that I used to say is 1 + 1 = 2. ADUs, that's what they are. 1 + 1 = 2. If you have a primary and you have a new you have an ADU. From the state, not talking about multifamily, but on single family, it's still the same. If you have single family homes, you get one ADU. So now we're going to get into kind of what happens in this process. And we like to think of this as kind of a fun project. A lot of people think that it's a DIY project. I'm just going to kind of run through the typical process from start to finish for you guys so that you guys understand the complexities involved. So things to know up front, you kind of need to know the basics about your property, your size, whether you're on sewer or septic. You want to know if there's any existing easements. A lot of properties in the county have easements for neighbors running through them. And that is going to affect things later on. Talking about programming and what your project is for, you really want to kind of narrow that vision down to what exactly you're building this for. We like to think of the flexibility in these kinds of structures, but when we're designing something that has multiple uses over time, it can be more expensive because you're not designing for a specific purpose. So when we get into pre-design, we're looking at all of those goals, all of those, the things that you have kind of put together your wish list for. We're establishing a budget, we're looking through all the feasibility. And then we're going into the site analysis and site measurements. And this is where the design process really begins, because we're looking at all the things on your site that affect how this building is going to be built, where it can be built, how efficient it is. And so we're looking at the topography, we're looking at the sewer or the septic layouts, we're looking at all of the things that would impact that. Then we go into schematic design. This is where we're actually starting to design the unit for the purpose that it's there. So these are the floor plans, basic elevations, figuring out what that looks like. Your big thing that you need to be evaluating through all this is your hierarchy of needs. What are your priorities? Because we can't always get everything that you want on a project. And a lot of times when we try to do that, it ends up being something that the end result is unrecognizable from what you wanted in the first place. So after we have the basics of the design together, now we're starting to develop the details that we're going to put into the plan for the consultants, the engineers, the Title 24 energy consultants. Once we have that process finished up, we're getting into the construction documents for submittal to the city. This is all of the details that are needed for construction. And so you're going to hear later from people at the county about the plans that they have available to start with. And I would just encourage you to think about the overall process and what goes into it, because there are definitely situations where those kinds of plans can be used. But how many of you live on a site or on a lot that is hilly, has topography? Okay. The way you design for a sloping lot is much different than the way you design for a flat lot. So starting with something that's designed for a flat lot and trying to accommodate it to a sloping lot can be much more expensive than just going through the average design process. So every city is a little bit different on the approval process, but essentially you turn in your plans, they give you corrections, and you turn in plans again, and you keep going through that, hopefully not more than twice. But the quality of plans that go in determine the amount of corrections coming out. And knowing the rules, knowing all of the details needed can be difficult from a homeowner perspective of knowing what's actually needed. Then as we get into the kind of the end of that process, after we've gone through all of those plan check corrections, now we have our approved set of drawings, and this is the set that you're going to keep on site. This is the set that the contractor is going to build from. This is essentially the instructions for the builder. One thing, just quick little side note, never give away this copy to a contractor. Make a copy or give them a digital set, because it's such a pain in the butt if you have to go back and recopy those and go through the process of the city to get new copies. So these stay on site. They're what the inspector looks at when he's out there inspecting the work, and then they're what the contractor uses to build. So this is just the design side of the process. This is not the build process. So as you guys are looking at how to get into this, it's important to remember that this is not a DIY process for a lot of homeowners. And if it is, there are ways to do it, but you still want to be engaging with professionals that understand what the requirements are and how to move through it.